In this video, let's look at some verses in Matthew 24. Maybe we can get a clearer understanding of which time period it is about. This is certainly not easy because the same chapter is about both the time that led up to Jerusalem's destruction in the year 70 Common Era and about the end time before Jesus' second coming. First, let's read the initial verses that show that Matthew 24 is about two different time periods. Let us read verses 1 to 3. Now, as Jesus was departing from the temple, his disciples approached to show him the buildings of the temple. In response, he said to them, "Do you not see all these things? Truly I say to you, by no means will a stone be left here upon a stone and not be thrown down." While he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples approached him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your presence and of the conclusion of the system of things?" Here we see that Jesus' disciples are asking three different questions. They ask about when the temple in Jerusalem will be destroyed and what the sign of Jesus' second coming will be and what will be the sign of the imminent end of this system of things. Jesus begins his answer in verse 4. He says, "Look out that nobody misleads you, for many will come on the basis of my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and will mislead many. You are going to hear of wars and reports of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for these things must take place, but the end is not yet." This verse seems to apply only to the end time ahead of us, because I have not found evidence that anybody in the first century claimed that he would be Jesus Christ returned. Still today, it is quite rare that somebody would claim to be the returned Jesus Christ. I have neither heard that around 1914 many would have been claiming to be the second coming of Jesus Christ. Certainly there have been a few throughout the ages as listed in Wikipedia, but not remarkably many as Jesus said there would be when the end is near. So does verse 5 point to a future period when there really will be many who will claim to be the second coming of Jesus Christ? It seems so. Later in the chapter, in verses 23 to 26, Jesus tells more about this, saying, "Then if anyone says to you, 'Look, here is the Christ,' or 'There,' do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will arise and will perform great signs and wonders so as to mislead, if possible, even the chosen ones. Look, I have forewarned you. Therefore if people say to you, 'Look, he is in the wilderness,' do not go out. Look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it." What can we say about that? Has anybody heard about false Christs that are actually performing great signs and wonders, or that Jesus Christ would be somewhere in a wilderness or inside a building? Have Jesus' chosen ones been tempted to go and look for false Christs as Jesus forewarned? For false Christs and false prophets will arise and will perform great signs and wonders so as to mislead, if possible, even the chosen ones. In our time that doesn't seem to be happening, and around 1914 it didn't either. And I haven't found evidence that it happened in the first century either. So this should to point to a future time, does it not? But it could be in the coming years, because false Christs would appear at the same time as there would be many wars, and now we have constant news about wars. In the next verse Jesus said, "You are going to hear of wars and reports of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for these things must take place, but the end is not yet." During the pandemic, we did not hear much about wars, but now it is really different. And after the fall of communism in Eastern Europe and after the end of the Cold War, it seemed that soon peace and security could be achieved. But now it looks more like things will get worse before it gets better. So, sadly, it seems that wars as a sign of the end time are beginning to get fulfilled in a remarkable way. That is really sad for all who are affected by it. In the next verses, in verses 7 and 8, Jesus adds, "For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be food shortages and earthquakes in one place after another. All these things are a beginning of pangs of distress." Some teach this prophecy was fulfilled in the first century after Jesus gave this sign. But I haven't found evidence that nation rose against nation and kingdom against kingdom in the 1st century. To the contrary, it was mainly peaceful in the Roman Empire except the Parthian War that happened in Armenia the years 58 to 63. And after that there was the Jewish War in 66 to 74. So it seems that Jesus' sign about nation rising against nation and kingdom against kingdom did not apply to the 1st century. Jehovah's Witnesses teach that it applies to 1914, because that year the First World War began. If that was true, there should have also been many false Christs and exceptionally frequent earthquakes and famines. Also, the sign of nearness of the end Jesus gave does not make any sense if it was about 1914. Because it was not near for people living during the First World War. They never got to live until the arrival of God's kingdom. It wasn't either near 20 years ago. The sign of the nearness of the end does not make any sense if it would encompass a long time period of decades. To make any sense, it should be about a relatively short time period of only a few years. Not decades. So to know if we are living in the foretold end time, we should have extraordinary many wars, food shortages, and earthquakes. Not only that, but Jesus says further in verses 9 and 10, "Then people will hand you over to tribulation and will kill you, and you will be hated by all the nations on account of my name. Then too, many will be stumbled and will betray one another and will hate one another." If we think honestly about the circumstances generally in the world and especially in the Western world, we see that the sign Jesus gave is not yet even nearly applicable to our time. Especially because of the absence of the foretold persecution of Jesus' followers. But we cannot deny that this end time could start soon. This was a little about Matthew 24. I hope I will be able to do more videos about the rest of the sign Jesus gave. I hope you got more clarity to what time Matthew 24 refers. And meanwhile, if you want more interesting explanations of the Bible, check out other videos on this channel.